TextBox Control allows the user to enter text in an application. The text entered or displayed in a text box can be changed via code. The commonly used properties are name, which is a unique ID to refer to a specific text box in code. You may have many of them out of there. There's a border style. It can be set to none, fixed single, or fixed 3D. The default is fixed 3D. There's an enable property. It's set to true as a default. And the control is visible, but it can't be used by the user if it is not enabled. So it is normally set to enabled. There's a font property, which has a name, size, and we can set it to bold, true or false for that. We have a location property, which sets the horizontal position on the form and the vertical position on the form. Continuing common use properties, there's a size with a width and a height that we can set the text box to. There's a tab index control. This is a sequence or order in which this control gets the focus when the user hits the tab key. This and other controls all have a tab index control. The text. What is displayed on the text box itself? There's a text alignment. You get alignment of text within the control. It can be left, center, or right. Left is the default. Visible. This is true or false or whether control will appear on the form. This is defaulted to visible, true. And we have a word wrap. The default is false. True, it will wrap the text for a multi-line display. If you look at the default event is the text changed event. In other words, if something or someone changes a text in the text box, you can activate the text change event if you write code for it. Let's take a look. This is our text box. We go and get it. We actually go get it by double-clicking on the toolbox and bring our text box to the form, and it's now sitting here. We can certainly go out and change the name. We want to do that if we're going to be working with this thing in code. And this thing, I might set it to TXT for text box. And then call it enter something. That'll be the name I refer to it in code. There's a border style. If we drop down, we can check the border style out. It is set for fixed 3D. I can change that to none or fixed single, but fixed 3D works just fine. There's an enable property. If you set this to false, you can't type anything in there until you actually turn it to true. The default is true, so you can start to work with text and actually enter things into it. There's a font property. The typical ones I use are the size, which I can change to, let's say, 12. And I can set the bold property on so that anything I type in there is going to be bold. I can also change the fonts if I wish to something else, Courier or whatever. There's a location property as to where the text box will be located on the form. X and Y, 243 and 485 is where we have this one set. I can take it and move the text box like this, and it changes those numbers. I can also go in here and set this to 200, and it will change the form. It'll pop over in a different spot there. There's a size property for the form. Now that I have text in here, well, I don't have text in here, but I have it set for 12, I might want to make this thing larger. And you can do that with the size property. The size property has an X and Y coordinates, width and height, I should say. You can set the width and the height property. Typically what's happening here is I can set the width property without any problem at all. But the height property is going to default to what my text size is. If we look at the size on the text box, I can't change the height. It's defaulting to 26. If I change this to a multi-form, this is another property that's out there, multi-line, and make that true, that's going to allow this property to be changed. And now I can set this to 100, and it does expand it. So you can use the height when you're working with multi-lines. It's not a commonly used property at this point in the game, especially as you're learning it. But as you get to use text boxes more and more, you can make this multi-line and put many things in it. I'm going to set this back to false. We have the text property. I'm going to put something in here right now. We'll say hello world. Or hello there. And based on the font that I put in here, this is what's showing up. I can change this text via code, or I can actually do it right in here inside this property. My text alignment, is, you can see it's set for the left. That's the default. I can set it to the center, and it pops up over here, or I can set it to the right and right justify it, and it'll go over there. I typically will use center in many of the applications I use, although it really depends on just what you're using the application for. There's a visible property. If it's set to false, the text will be invisible. There's a word wrap property, which allows text to work for a multi-line display where you can wrap text as it gets to the end on this thing. So that's what our text box looks like. What does it look like in code? If I run this thing, it looks just like this. But I can type something in here without any problems whatsoever. It'll allow that to happen. So the text is going to be used for input. Now, if I can take this text and move it to a variable or whatever I want via encode. I do want to show you the event. The commonly used event for the text box is the text change event. When you right now, there's no code out there. We'll go out to our form and look at our code, and should be nothing there. There's really nothing there. We're going to double click on the text box itself, and when you do that, the text changed event pops up. And this one happens to be text enter something, text changed. Let's get rid of our toolbox and open this thing up. I'm going to type a message box in here. And just leave it a message or text was changed. And I'll just put that in as the code that I'm writing for this particular thing. And we're all set. Now if I save this and go back to my starting position, my form will come up and you've got hello in there. I'm going to change this to goodbye. Notice as soon as I type the G in there, text was changed. And every time I type something, something else changes. It tells me the text has changed there. So as soon as something is put in there, that's what happens. If I clear it, text was changed. I can mass put something in. I'll paste the word text box and text was changed. That's the default event for the text box. Normally you won't need to do this unless you really want to interrogate your program when someone actually types something in there that something was changed. But typically if you're entering miles per gallon, time, gallons, whatever, typically you're not looking for that. You're just looking for an entry of some kind. But in the case of it being changed, for example, you got a name field. Somebody's changing their phone number, for example, in a phone field on an address thing. You might want to identify that the text has been changed. But instead of actually going there and giving a message box, you might launch off to another routine, which is then going to change that phone number or address or whatever else out on file someplace. That's really it. That's what the text box looks like and the controls you're going to need for it. That's it.